Time. It's something we all take for granted. We think we have forever, but the reality is none of us knows how much time we truly have. And for those facing Alzheimer's disease, time takes on a whole new meaning. It steals memories, it robs independence, and it slowly fades away the person you love. But there is hope. This PodCastAthon episode, in addition to raising funds, we are diving deep into the world of Alzheimer's with two incredible individuals from the Alzheimer's Association. They are on the front lines of the fight against this devastating disease, providing support to families, funding crucial research, and advocating for a cure. Join us as we explore the latest breakthroughs, the personal stories, and the ways you can make a difference. Your donation, big or small, can help fuel the fight and bring us closer to a world without Alzheimer's disease. Welcome back, Fading Memories listeners. You always know how much I appreciate you giving us time every week. This week, we got something really exciting going on. You may have noticed in social media that we are participating in the PodCastAthon, which is 1,000+ podcasts, all dedicating an episode of their shows this week. And we all chose a charity or organization to hopefully have you guys donate to. And it should be no surprise that I am having you donate to the Alzheimer's Association. And so with that in mind, I have Alexandra and Ingrid, you guys are both from the Northern California chapter, right? Okay, Northern California, Northern Nevada chapter. And we're just going to talk all things Alzheimer's Association. Since I'm a professional volunteer, I would think everybody would want to know all about you guys. So thanks for joining me, ladies.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Happy to be here.
Oh, you're welcome. So let's start with the history. Like, when did the Alzheimer's Association start? Like, I don't even know that.
Yeah, so the Alzheimer's Association was actually founded in 1979 by a gentleman by the name of Jerome Stone. His efforts really started in early 1970s when his wife was first diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And he realized, along with some other family caregivers, that there was very little information about the disease. Only a few support groups existed, and they were literally being held around kitchen tables in people's homes. So through his efforts, he joined with 7 independent groups who wanted to form a national organization. And these groups consisted of researchers, physicians, caregivers, and just other humanitarians who were really interested in the cause. And so they held their first official meeting on December 4th, 1979, to really discuss solutions for the need of Alzheimer's information, support, and of course, a cure for the disease.
I had no idea when it started, so I was thinking it was either not as late as that, or let's see, more recent, there we go, or further back. So that's interesting. I was in junior high then, back in the days when they called it junior high. Yeah. Yes, I'm one of those Gen Xers, so like I love all the videos you can find online nowadays about our generation. Or mine, it's like, I don't think Ingrid's a Gen Xer. I don't know about Alexandra.
I am.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and was that in Chicago where it started? Because that's where headquarters is. That much I do.
That's where headquarters is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So, but then it quickly became a national organization. And so they had a variety of chapters across the nation, which we still have now, but now it's a larger national organization with our home office being in Chicago.
It's down the road from the Rotary International headquarters.
Oh, interesting. Should do some outreach to them.
Oh, so before the pandemic, you may not know that Rotary's big philanthropic push is to end polio globally, which we are very, very, very close to doing. I think we're down to one country like Pakistan, which you can kind of understand why vaccinating children in the country that has the troubles they have is problematic. When they started this in the 80s. I should remember what year. My history starts blending together. But I was in high school, so they've been working on this for a long time. They thought it would cost a few $1 million, and it would take a few years. Here they are, 40+ years later. But somebody I talked to in the recent past talked to me about, so there was hope that Rotary would take on helping find a cure for Alzheimer's after we fix the polio problem. And I was like, oh, I would be so down for that. However, I think they might be a little burned out.
Oh,
So I don't know. So there has been outreach. I don't know. I don't know what's going back in Chicago. I'll have to go back there and knock on both doors and find out.
wow.
So how many, I hope this isn't a trick trivia question. Do you know how many chapters there are nationwide?
Ingrid, go ahead.
No, I mean, I don't have a number, but I know we're nationwide. We're part of one of the largest chapters in Northern California and Northern Nevada. The best chapter. No.
Of course.
There's over 80 chapters nationwide.
So there are 7 in California. Am I correct?
Correct.
Yay. Some brain cells work.
Yes.
And is NorCal, North Nevada the biggest?
As far as territory, yes. As far as people served, absolutely. So we are across the nation. We actually, last year, Illinois chapter beat us, but we typically serve the most unduplicated constituents in the nation. And that's through our helpline, education, support groups, et cetera, which we can get into that when you're ready.
Well, we might as well. Maybe we should start. Well, I'm going to ask one quick question. Do you have any idea why it's Northern California, Northern Nevada? Like, who made that choice? That's a weird choice.
I don't know. I don't have that answer for you.
It's like Nevada's not big enough to be split into North and South.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Who knows? Just probably the boundary lines, or maybe one of our chapter board members lived in that area and decided to do outreach there.
Probably Rotary's districts, which are similar, are also very strange. So, it's got to be personal choices. So let's start with. So I started my journey with the organization in 2019. Technically 2018, I was recruited to do legislative advocacy, and I told the gal at the time that I would not be able to do anything until after the beginning of the year. So she did not let any days go by before I was recruited to go to my first state advocacy day. So I've done advocacy days all the months and online. I've had all the experiences, including the year when you guys had to find a new meeting place the day of.
Yes.
I think, was it a water leak or something?
Yep. I think it was a water leak. Yeah.
I'm driving to Sacramento and I'm like, what? Wait a minute. Where are we? Hold on. Something's changed here. That must have been a fun day. But I started with legislative advocacy. So I'm kind of assuming that didn't come before support groups, which I also do.
Yes, the care and support services were first. As I mentioned, they were, sitting around a table having support groups. And then there obviously was the need to advocate at our local and federal levels, not only for more research, of course, to find a cure, but also to help prepare our physicians and the workforce of, how to engage with people with the disease, how to support the caregivers. And so a lot of legislation has come around that in our advocacy efforts, supporting, our caregivers in addition to research and people living with the diagnosis. And a lot lately has been coming out around training for our providers.
Yeah, that could be a whole other episode.
Yes.
Having lived through the experience, yes, I can. It's been fun telling those stories at the Capitol, but we don't know what we're working on this year just yet. So we will, because this episode comes out after Advocacy Day this year.
Okay.
So Advocacy Day 2025 is March 5th, correct?
5th.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. See, I told you, brain cells do work.
Good job.
Well, it used to be in February. I don't think we should go any earlier than March 5th because I have been to the Capitol in February. It is absolutely freezing, and walking between buildings is horrible. Because then you got to lug around a coat in the Capitol, which is generally warm enough. So yeah, let's keep it. May was nice, but I understand why we don't want to do it that close to the end of the fiscal year for the state. Not enough time to get them to take action. So
Exactly.
I should have asked when we started if you guys could tell me your title. So let's start with Ingrid because she's being very quiet.
Oh, sorry. So I'm the program and community engagement specialist here. at the Greater Sacramento Alzheimer's Association office. And I guess a little bit about what I do. I do a lot of like the diversity outreach to a lot of underserved communities. So I have the privilege of doing Latino outreach too. So many of the programs that I provide are in Spanish and also some in English.
That's one thing I won't be able to help with. So you can't recruit me for the Spanish programs. I foolishly took French in junior high and high school because I wanted to be different. Bad choice.
You different?
Yes, me. Yeah, that's my MO. I like different. I like variety. So yeah. And I did not meet anybody that actually spoke French until I was in my 30s. So
wow.
By then it was like, yes, French. No, I don't remember how to speak it very much. So sorry about that one. So Alexandra, what is your title?
My title is Director of Care and Support. I too am based here in the Greater Sacramento office. So oversee our programs here, but then also have some initiatives across the chapter as it relates to our volunteer engagement and education reach. So trying to really train our volunteers and our staff partners to help us reach more people, because that's the ultimate goal, is to raise awareness and make sure that people get the services that they need.
Well, since that's a good segue into the support group. So I didn't even know about the Alzheimer's Association until mid 2017. My father passed away in March. I went to my first bereavement support group that the hospice company was putting on. And I was a very big support to everybody there because they realized, oh, holy crap, my life's not as best. She's kind of worse. I made everybody feel so much better when they left that day. And I realized that, yeah, I was sad about losing my dad, but I had this whole other issue of what in the hell am I going to do to engage with my mom and make sure she had quality of life? I thought I knew what I was doing because, she'd had Alzheimer's for a long time by then. And I quickly realized I didn't know squat. And so I Googled, like most people do in these days, and went to my first Alzheimer's support group in November of 2017. And that is when I actually learned that I was actually a caregiver, because I did not identify with that, because I just assumed that what I was doing was what, most loving daughters would do. Hopefully most loving daughters would do. So that was really beneficial. And then my mom passed away in March of 2020. And in 2021, I got recruited to be a support group facilitator. They were hoping I would take over the group that I'd been a part of, which I would have loved, but we moved. And so now I facilitate a support group online, and they are amazing. They don't really need me. I just they opened the Zoom link too. So I managed to send out the reminder email with no link. So they figured out how to get to the meeting with just the meeting ID number or something. I was like, oh, good Lord. It's like, they really don't need me. They're so fantastic. There was a new guy and they were helping him out while they were helping him because he had dialed in. And he's like, how do I get seen? They were walking him through the tech, and it's just crazy. Crazy way to start our first support group of the year, but they are amazing. And it's actually kind of enjoyable to be alongside them with their journey, because a lot of people have lost a spouse. I still have one attendee who's in that bucket. There was a big group that, eventually a lot of people put their loved ones in memory care residences, and then there's some that still have them at home. So everybody's in a little bit of a different place. And it's lovely how much they help each other. And then sometimes they'll turn to me and ask what my experience was or what my opinion is. They remember that I'm there, which sounds terrible, but no, they're actually lovely, lovely people. So do we have any idea how many support groups you guys facilitate?
Across the country or in our chapter?
Oh, let's start with chapter. That's probably an easier answer.
Ingrid?
I don't have that number. I know we have several here in Sacramento, but I don't have a number to.
Yeah, it's over 120 support groups. Here in Sacramento, we have between virtual and in-person, I think we have 19. But our Sacramento office serves 8 counties. So That includes Nevada County and Stanislaus, Yolo, et cetera. And it's, the pandemic happened, which of course made us go virtual. And I will say that a lot of people have been able to explore that as an option and not have to worry about finding care for their loved one while they go in person to a support group. And some of our support groups are back in person as well.
Yeah, my group was in person, and then they went online. And I don't know when they went back in person. I'm assuming they did. I know they were working on it. They weren't sure if they could go back to the same location. It was like, because it'd been like 2 years. But by that point, you guys had started the bereavement group, but I was already grandfathered out of that because my mom had been gone for 2 years. So we talk about the post caregiving bereavement groups, because I don't think that's as well known.
Yeah. So we have, as people transition on, we have groups for caregivers who've lost their loved ones to provide that support. I think it's important too, Jennifer, and maybe you can talk to this because you are a support group facilitator, but to talk a little bit about the anticipatory grief that comes up in these support group meetings. I was on a call earlier today and that came up, and people were asking if we discussed that during our current support groups, and really that loss, watching your loved one kind of lose their abilities before the end of life and what that means for you as a caregiver. Is that something you experience?
I think we did discuss it, not necessarily like formally, but people would, the group that I was in, there was one meeting where I think there were 30 of us. So just going around the room and introducing ourselves and saying who we were caring for and like what we were struggling with that month. That was like the end of the hour and a half. So it was a challenge. But, people would talk about, feeling, really sad and just, this is so hard because, this is my husband, but it's not my husband, or it's my mom, but, it's not my mom. So my mom, I was in my early 30s when she started having memory loss. She technically had early onset or younger onset Alzheimer's. Not sure which term is the current one.
Before the age of 65?
Yeah, she wasn't diagnosed before the age of 65, so technically she didn't have that diagnosis. But by the time she was diagnosed at 69, it was like, yeah, duh. Tell me something we all didn't already know. Because I'm sure Alexander probably remembers this, but my maternal grandmother had vascular dementia. So, you think my family would have been just dialed right in on the caregiving. We were not. Caregiving is so hard on families that it's not easy to do it well. And we didn't do it super well. So my dad didn't do it well. So I think we've gotten better with me, but we're gonna stop here. Well, there's no more caregiving after my mom. It's my manifestation. But you were talking about anticipatory grief. I'm trying to think. We're actually going to, I think we're going to talk about that. Oh, well, let's see. The new person in my group wants to talk about how, as a caregiver, the struggle with not being able to fix things, which I think is, well, I was thinking it was more of a male perspective, but now I'm rethinking that. So that kind of goes along with anticipatory grief. It's like you want to take care of the problem and make them better, make them feel better, and you can't. And it's just, that's such a difficult feeling. I used to get angry because I was like, my mom should be doing the things she always wanted to do, traveling, hanging out with the grandkids. And it was, I had to get past the anger because that didn't benefit either of us. But yeah, anticipatory grief is hard, and then they pass on.
Yeah.
And part of you is like, oh, thank God. And the other part of you is like, oh my God. That's a fun roller coaster. And I literally lost my mom March 31st, 2020, when the whole country and the whole world was going, what the hell is happening?
Yes.
And so the experience of losing my mom March 30th, 2020 versus my dad March 2nd, 2017, very, very different.
I bet.
So yeah, it was hard.
Yeah.
Well,
If I could just add too about our support group, since we're talking about that service. So we also offer an early stage support group. So there's a group for people who are living with an early stage diagnosis of any type of dementia or cognitive impairment. It doesn't have to be Alzheimer's disease. And then there's a group that meets simultaneously at the same time, just in a different room, or if you are on Zoom, obviously at different times. But it's a really good opportunity for people who are living with the disease to talk about what's going on with them as well, because obviously it affects the caregivers. But if you're still early on in the disease, you want to talk about that, not being able to make it to your daughter's wedding or remembering who your grandkids are. So it's a very valuable group that our programs and services and our kind donors help support and fund.
Yeah. And then just to add to that, I would say that we have support groups in different languages too. So I know we have our Chinese support group and then our Spanish speaking support group, which they meet via telephone, because I know that different platforms work for different people. And so in different groups. And so that's just something that we try to do too. Just, take that into consideration. But when you say caregiving, I do think that even if you don't identify with the term, everyone is caring and doing their best with what they know, right? And I think that sometimes reminding yourself of that everyone's just, you're doing your best. And it's something that, we're just going to kind of have to work through. And especially as the disease progresses, I think that we kind of travel along the grief process too.
yes, because we just experienced that with one of my attendees. They put their loved one in memory care, and I think he was there for 11 months. And she struggled with putting him on hospice, and having been through that experience twice, I have a lot of positive opinions on doing it sooner rather than later. And I don't think anybody else in our group has or had a loved one on hospice, but they were all in agreement with my sooner is better than later. And now she's navigating life without her spouse. And she announced that she's catching up on all of the taking care of herself now.
Yep.
So it sounds weird to say that it's kind of fun to just like walk alongside of them with their journeys. And there's one gal whose mom is in memory care, and she started a residence group at the it's a assisted living memory care residence, and she's just dove right into she's advocating for the residents, and she's doing all these things, and she's keeping notes. And I said, sounds like a book in the works. And so you guys know, I talk to a lot of caregivers like myself, who I term caregiver turned creators. So people that have created something post caregiving or even while they're caregiving, books, courses, apps, you name it. I've talked to them all. So it's kind of, it's just really interesting to see where she was when I started 2 years ago and where she's at now. And it's like, I don't know, maybe it's like parenting. It's like I see them blossoming, and even though it's a difficult situation. And I was going to ask Ingrid, so are the non-English support groups solely telephone, or do they have some in person?
No, I think that I think the Chinese ones be neat. I want to say via Zoom. I know they have the video feature involved, but I know the Spanish speaking support group, it has better attendance when they're better attended via telephone. It's just a better platform for them to connect. So, because everyone, most people have access to a telephone.
This is true. So let's go back to advocacy. Advocacy Day is a lot of fun. My first time, it was terrifying. First off, if anybody's ever been to the California State Capitol, they have an addition that they added onto. It is seriously like a rat maze. You almost need to leave breadcrumbs to find your way out. I guess they're renovating the Capitol some more. Apparently, California's got money somewhere. And we're in a really nice building, like an office building with, we don't need to leave breadcrumbs. It's much easier to find people. But when my experience was 99% of the time you talk to the legislative staff, and a lot of times they have a connection to Alzheimer's. So you connect on that personal level, which is important for the advocacy, but it's also kind of nice just to be there and support somebody else that you've just met. And then I went to DC once. That was fun. Thankfully, the team leader that I was with was a former Hill staffer, so she knew how to get around because I'd probably still be lost in the Capitol building. So it's, you realize you're talking to people, even if you do get to talk to or see the legislator, and many of them do have a connection to the disease, or they know somebody who has, a family member, and you tell your story. And lately our chapter, I don't know if any other chapters are doing it, has been helping train people on telling your story for advocacy, which is a great tool. But how important is it for just, us normal everyday citizens to head to the Capitol and harass our lawmakers, as I like to call it?
Yeah, well, I think that you just kind of highlighted that so many people are affected by this disease. And I've had a similar experience when I go to advocacy days. And you say, here's my story, and the staffer or the legislator says, oh, I have a connection to the disease as well. My grandmother is currently living with it. So I think that connection right away, that unfortunately so many people have a similar story, or knew somebody or know someone who's going through the disease. I think that's an instant connection. But it's important, too, to not only for the caregivers, people who've lived it, but those that are actually living with the disease come to the Capitol and share their story and say, hey, this is what's going on with me, and this is what I'd like to see happen. And so through our advocacy efforts, the federal government has committed over $3.8 billion to research as to where we stand today. And that's a considerable amount. If you look back 10 years ago, it was barely over $1 million, right? And so by through those advocacy efforts, we're really seeing the funding increase, and the need, as I mentioned earlier, for training for our providers, because that's what's going to get us that cure, right? We have to put the funding in so that we can fund those clinical trials. And of course, we need to get individuals who will go into those clinical trials, but you got to have the money behind it, and sharing your story really elevates that for our legislators to hear the need of why we need this funding.
I actually have a past guest, and I will link this episode in the show notes so you guys can go back and listen to it again. There's a researcher, and I don't want to state what they were researching on, but I think it was it's like biomedicine. I'm not saying it completely right because it's been a little while. But in that episode, they actually said that they would not have gotten their research off the ground if it wasn't for a grant from the Alzheimer's Association. So I was thrilled to hear that. I never even thought of asking any of them that. So it was nice that he volunteered that.
Yeah.
But I also have a story. So was it 2023? We were hoping to get funding to increase training for police officers to get dementia training. And unfortunately, because California has a boom-bust economy, that law did not pass. But the legislator that we talked to had a next-door neighbor, an older woman with obvious cognitive issues, try to get into the legislator's house through the back door one evening. Purely confused, no ill intentions, she was just confused. And you can kind of imagine in this political day and age that could have been really bad. So thankfully, this particular legislator understood what was going on, didn't call the police, didn't call the cavalry on this poor lady. So they'd had the experience of, a situation that could go really, really wrong. So I think they supported the legislation. I'd have to go back and look. But then this same exact legislator had a stroke. She's not that old, and she had aphasia, which is not being able to find words. She's better now, but she was not at advocacy day last year, so 2024. So 23, we were trying to get police funding. 24, she was not present because she was recuperating from this. So she's had personal stuff happen that really kind of connects her to what the association is advocating for. And our track record is generally pretty good with getting our proposed legislation passed. This past year, we got all of their bills passed, correct? All three?
Correct. Yeah. And the association, to your point earlier, the association currently has more than $430 million invested in over 1,100 active projects in 56 countries spanning 6 continents. And that's all for research.
That's too much math for me.
Yeah, basically, we're funding a lot of research across the globe.
Well, let's talk a little bit about research, because I think people only hear about the new treatments, the good, the bad. You know, you can have your opinions on that. I have talked to people that have been on them, talked to a gal who is waiting. Well, she was waiting a little over a year ago, or a little less than a year ago. And, but, there's still got a little controversy around it. From a media perspective, it seems like all the money is going into one bucket, but that can't possibly be true with what you just said. So what do you know what kind of other research is being funded?
Yeah. Ingrid, do you want to take a stab at that, or would you like me to answer it?
Well, I know we're wrapping up the Pointer study here in Sacramento. It's been something that we've collaborated with UC Davis. And it's really, the Pointer study is a research study on lifestyle factors and really just looking at how that will, our risk factors for, getting some type of dementia. And I believe that one of the research studies last year's stated that about 40% of all dementia can be prevented just through lifestyle factors. So I know that it's just a research is such as like a big part of it. We understand the importance of it just down the road of having, just a survivor one day. And I think that's probably why we provide just so much funding for it. But in regards to like locally here in Sacramento, that's one of the studies that we have wrapping up, which is pretty exciting. I'm excited to see what the results and the stats look like for that study.
Yeah, it's kind of a oops, sorry.
No, that's the U.S. Pointer study. There's 5 sites across the country, and UC Davis right here in our backyard in Sacramento is the one that Ingrid's referencing, and it's really looking at risk reduction. So how do we incorporate healthy lifestyle factors to help reduce our risk of developing the disease? So that's obviously a major area of study. But there is a variety of studies, Jennifer, as you can imagine, looking from the diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, because we know that folks are disproportionately affected by the disease. So there's a lot of study around that, looking at cardiovascular health, of course, medications and the targets of is it the amyloid we're targeting? Is it the tau, et cetera? But yeah, a variety of studies are happening. And to Ingrid's point, that risk reduction is really at the forefront.
I'm glad to hear 40% possibility of reducing dementia, because I also had a great-grandmother. My maternal great-grandmother had some form of dementia. Maternal grandmother had vascular dementia. Mom had Alzheimer's. We're done. 3 is enough. We're not progressing with that trend ever again. So I actually, in 2006, went on a weight loss journey because on my dad's side of the family is all diabetics. And we know diabetes is not good for anything, and it's also a precursor to potential dementias.
Correct.
So I went on a journey to just figure out how the hell to lose weight and keep it off. And I did, lost over 100 pounds.
Wow, congratulations.
And I kept it off through caregiving and menopause, and it is just, my lifestyle is non-negotiable. The way I eat, I like to say I belong to the cult of Peloton. So I'm a complete Peloton advocate, as well as advocating for the Alzheimer's Association. And I do not like it when things disrupt my routine and I don't work out at about the same time every day. Like going to Atlanta with the Alzheimer's Association.
They have a gym.
Good, because I'm on the 100 day, the first 100 days of the year, they have like a challenge, like 100 days in a row, which I've already done. Yes. I'm really,
Every day?
uh-huh,
Good
something.
for you.
Yep. And I've started using the meditation classes, sleep meditation. I do some morning ones to kind of like get my brain fired up and fired up in a positive way for the day. Instead of reading emails or other things you're not supposed to do right before you get up.
Uh-huh.
But I am 58 and I feel really great physically, mentally. I don't have brain fog except for names. I can remember things really well. Always been terrible with names.
Well, then that's an always, right? That's not a new problem.
No, that's always been a problem. And I've tried all the tricks, paying attention. I think it's because I'm super visual. When I was doing photography, I had a family of 5 come in for a family portrait. Mom introduced herself, then she introduced dad, then kid number 1, 2, and 3. By the time she got to kid number 3, I had completely forgotten her name. I was like, and I was like, and I looked at her and I'm like, that's Alexandra, and this is Dave, and I don't know what it is. I just tell people I'm lousy with names. I butcher names. Don't take it personally. I don't know how long it's been going on, but it is definitely not a new thing. So we've covered advocacy, support group, research. Did I miss anything?
Education.
Oh, yes, duh. I forgot that part. How could I forget?
Education's a big piece. Yeah, education and our helpline. I think that's a big piece. And we'd also, if we have some time, we kind of would like to tell you where the money goes, since we're asking people to donate to the organization, other than the pillars that we've been talking about, but kind of breaking it down a little bit. So
do you want to do that now as a trailer to research, or should we talk about education first? I can't believe it.
Well, it's actually a breakdown for our care and support services so that people.
Okay. So in 2024, I also became a community educator. No more volunteer.
How do you, Jennifer?
This is why I tell you I'm a professional volunteer.
You really are.
Great.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I can tell you what I do as a community educator is I basically go to the community either in person or through Zoom and teach programs on various aspects of caregiving. One of my favorites is dealing with typical dementia behaviors. I think I could do that one in my sleep, and I can do the 10 warning signs and, all about Alzheimer's and dementia, especially since Alexandra created a specific 20-minute version of those 2 courses for a request from a service group in my actual community, like the gated community that I live in. That was fun.
Yeah.
Alexandra called me and said, don't you live in X place? And I said, yes, I do. And she's like, oh, these people. I'm like, okay, tell me when, I'll be there.
You're like, they're right down the street from me.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I could walk if I didn't have to carry a bunch of stuff. So like my laptop and paperwork and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, they said 20 minutes. I was there for their entire meeting. And I think I did do the program in about 22 minutes. And then we had about 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. So they were thrilled.
Yeah. 20 minutes is really never 20 minutes because people have a lot of questions, because especially if it's their first exposure to information and education. So you highlighted some of our programs. Ingrid, do you want to highlight some of the other ones that we offer?
Yeah, I know. Well, we have several curriculums. So there's that great introductory program. We also have our Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia, which I think is a great program that goes over, just different terminology. What does the disease look like? And then we have our, the 10 warning signs, which I think is really interesting because we think about Alzheimer's as a memory thing, and it's really a little bit more than just memory. And to be able to, dive deeper as to what those cognitive issues are. I think it's really interesting. I actually really like presenting that program. So Jennifer, I don't know if you have one that is your favorite, but that's the one that I lean towards. We have Healthy Living for Your Brain and Body. It's great for just the general audience, right? And it goes into just healthy habits, right? Which I think it's I think everyone can kind of relate to that. What's something that either is a good reminder or something that I can do a little bit better? And then we have our caregiving curriculum. So understanding and responding to behaviors, right? So, because behavior is a language and being able to understand it, but it can take some, work, just really honing in on that skill. Also, our communications workshop. And then I know we have some legal and financial information too, a workshop that's usually led by one of our volunteer attorneys. So those are the ones that I'm thinking of right now. I know we have I apologize, what was that? It's Alexander, I'm going to lean on you.
Yeah, the Empowered Caregiver Program. Yes, it's a 5-part, so you can break it up into the 1 class, 5 classes, and basically it's that, Jennifer, you deliver some of those programs, and it's really designed for the caregiver who's probably a middle stage caregiver, communication, supporting independence. When it's time to look for additional care, what does that look like for the caregiver and the family? So, the bottom line is we have a program for everybody. And because of our generous donors and donations, all of our services are free of charge. We do not charge anybody. We're a nonprofit organization. And if people need help, we want to make sure that they get that help. And Jennifer, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but we have a respite grant. And so that respite grant helps fund a break for our caregivers. That's basically what respite needs. So if people need a break, they give us a call and we can use that funding to either have their loved one go to an adult day center or hire an in-home care agency to come in. And maybe it's during those difficult times when your loved one doesn't want to take a shower and you ask for help from that caregiver. So just knowing that we're here, to provide that support in so many capacities is important. And most importantly, and I'm sure you'll put this somewhere on the podcast, is our 24/7 helpline. People can
1-800-272-3900.
There it is. Call at any time if it's 2 a.m. and your loved one is trying to walk out the door because they were a night nurse and they think it's time to go to work. You give us the call and we will help provide support. If you're looking for resources, it's a helpline. It's exactly that. You can call it whenever you need.
I have a helpline story that's outside the norm, but it just showcases how beneficial it is. Oh. So my husband is a property manager. He has a rental that's it's in a 55 plus community. That used to sound old, and now I could go live there. And one of the houses has a couple in it, and the woman's got some sort of dementia. And I don't know what she was doing. She was funding a plumber's Ivy League college education or trips to the Bahamas, but she was plugging up all the drains. Thankfully, my husband obviously understands living with somebody with a cognitive disease, but he's like, I understand their issue, but I also have a responsibility to the homeowner. And he felt like he was in a legal gray area. So he called and got the poor support person on the phone who probably went, what the hell? They did call him back with an answer. They didn't have it right then, but I told him they're not going to have an answer right away for you. That's outside the norm. But they did call back, and he was really impressed. And it helped because he's like, he could call the California Association of Realtors, their legal team, but they don't understand dementia. And it was like, oh my God. He was like, this is like a really strange gray area. So it was nice that he could call them. And they could provide a little bit of advice. I don't think I ever heard what the advice was, though.
That's good to know because, we always talk about it from a family caregiver perspective, but that's a great illustration of how vast the helpline is and for people to use. Thanks for sharing that. I hadn't heard that before, Jennifer. You missed telling me a story?
I want to learn how to not tell all the stories so that the presentations are not 3 hours long. Especially when they're on Zoom. Boy, they get really quite pissy if I go for an hour and 10 minutes. I got a little chastised once. I wonder. Just a little. They weren't mean about it, but they were like, we need to keep this to an hour. And I'm like, I know, but I've been podcasting for almost 8 years. Like I have more stories than I have time for. So I have learned how to highlight all the best ones. So I think we hit all of the pillars. So you were going to talk about where all the funding goes. We kind of got a little hint, but go for it.
Yeah. So just a little example of where and how the money goes. So for the care and support services, so for example, $25 would provide support to a helpline call. And again, we don't charge for any of our services, but so that people can have that framework. $200 would provide education programs for an individual and their care partner. And then we have what's called a care consultation. So those are really in-depth conversations with a care consultant that talks about family planning, any type of behavioral management. It's really kind of getting into the weeds of the situation. So that example would be, if you were to meet with somebody, a geriatric care manager, that would probably be about $200. So, it's just giving a broad overview of what that money, we don't charge for the services, but what that money could look like once distributed. And then we have our Walk to End Alzheimer's and the Longest Day, which also helps us fund the research that we talked about, our advocacy efforts, and then, of course, our programs and services. And I'll turn it to Ingrid to talk a little bit about the Walk to End Alzheimer's and the Longest Day.
So we have a Walk to End Alzheimer's, usually probably it's in all across the country, right? And they're usually held in like September and October. So later on in the year, it's, we're fundraising all year long, but it usually culminates into that one day for our Walk to End Alzheimer's. And it's really an opportunity to just come out and create awareness and either honor your loved one, either in memory or, yeah. And then we have different flowers that kind of represent different things, right? So the orange flower is if you just, you support the cause. Yellow, if you're a caregiver. Blue, if you are someone who has the disease or related dementia. And purple, is if you've lost a loved one to the disease. So, during the walk, we'll go ahead and we'll raise our flowers and just everyone kind of showing support and really just, there to support each other too, because we have different vendors and different organizations that also show up to show like what their programs and services are, right? Because we're really an organization that relies a lot on our partnerships with different organizations in the community. So I know we have during the walk, something that I think is really touching is our ceremony, and it's usually where I know that we have somebody who, raises the different colored flower, but then we also on that day have a very special white flower. And that's, because of our hopefully soon first survivor of Alzheimer's. So that I think is pretty powerful and it brings a lot of hope to everyone. I get a little emotional when I see it because it's been, I know my daughter did it 1 year, I think 2 years ago. So that was a big honor for her and for us to be able to do that. And then we have the Longest Day, which is our second largest fundraiser. And that's where we, everyone kind of has, it's held on the longest day of the year, right? The summer solstice, but it doesn't necessarily have to be held on that day. And everyone who participates, you can kind of choose your own fundraiser, whether that's having a bowling event and everyone who participates, donate that day, or it kind of looks a little bit different. 1 year for TLD, which is the Longest Day, I did a garage sale. And so everything that I raised there, I went ahead and I donated it all. So that was just one way that I think TLD really allows the participant to be creative in their own way, in their own meaningful way, whether that be through a hobby or an activity. So I think that's a little bit of just, how to get involved. If, you can also volunteer on the day of for Walk Day. I will see you there. You'd like to participate in registration. That's where I'm usually at. But, yeah, I think it's just two different ways, to fundraise and they're both pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And Jennifer, I don't know where your listeners call in from, but we have over 600 walks across the country. So even if they're not based here in Sacramento, they can find a walk near them.
It's the global ones that'll have a little bit of trouble finding a walk close by. But the majority of my audience is in the United States. So they can find, and the walks are a lot of fun. And what they're about a mile, they're not challenging.
There's a 1 mile and a 3 mile, but you don't even have to walk. It's really about raising awareness and coming together as a community to share that camaraderie, if you will. And unfortunately, so many people have been touched by the disease, but when you're all together, it's quite the experience that you're not alone.
I've done the East Bay Walk, which is Contra Costa. It might be Alameda County too.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did the virtual walk, which I guess was 2020. So it was my husband and I, our 3 golden retrievers, and my support group facilitator. And we were masked up and we walked around downtown Brentwood, Northern California Brentwood, as my friend calls it, the not O.J. Simpson Brentwood. And we walked around on the Saturday when they had the farmers market. And we just kind of stuck to the sidewalks, little social distancing. So that was interesting. And now I'm part of the Sacramento Walk. And I sort of help support another gal's walk team that's in Yuba City. And I forgot where her other one is. She's like, she handles 2. And I make her thank you cards.
Yes. Yuba City and Chico.
I
think are her walk.
It could be. Yeah. So we won't tell her that I've mentally started on her thank you cards already. And then I actually was presented with my purple flower in person at my house before the walk in 2020.
Wow.
Because there wasn't in-person walks, so I wouldn't have gotten a flower that year when my mom died.
Oh.
So yeah, it was kind of special. So I have how many were there? I think I have 1 of each or 2 of each color. I have like 5 or 6 flowers. I kind of start collecting them.
Yeah.
And of course, I use them to make my background, which is over here. There we go. Well, this has been fantastic. The fundraiser link is for my walk team, or it might be for my longest day team. I'm not sure yet. I have to decide. But either way, now you guys all know where the money will go. And I want to thank Alexandra and Ingrid for joining me and filling me in on a few details I didn't know about the association. Now I've just stepped up to the next level of professional volunteer. And I appreciate you guys helping me out with this PodCastAthon fundraiser episode.
Well, we appreciate you, Jennifer, and everything you do in so many capacities for our organization. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And that 800 number, reach out if you need us. We'll figure, even if you don't know why you're calling, we'll figure out how we can help you.
That's very true. Thank you, Ingrid.